Welcome, everybody, to the American Space Museum. I'm Mark Marquette. So glad you joined us today to stay curious. It's Wednesday, June 11th, 2025, on a hot and muggy day here in Titusville, Florida, where our museum is located downtown, just 3 blocks from the best place to watch launches, Space View Park, and 9 miles away from where that Falcon 9 may have been pulled into the garage to check its rocket for Axiom 4 that got canceled this morning, much to a lot of people's dismay. So they'll get it fixed out, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. Got a heavy show about space history. You know, as the director of the museum, I've got some duties that throughout the day, and so sometimes I go a few minutes late. And today I threw a program together about space history events going on today on June 11th. I think it'll kind of amaze you, some of the cool things going on, as every day in space history has things cool going on it there. But we want to, I just by way of saying some of my duties, I had a Chamber of Commerce Titusville luncheon that the mayor was at, and our executive director of our foundation, Gabriel Rothblatt, and I attended. We're binary stars, each doing different duties for doing business as the American Space Museum is my duties, and he's over the foundation trying to rustle up bushel baskets full of $100 bills for our nonprofit. So hope that sometimes you forgive that sometimes my shows aren't as polished, but that's where you come in to comment and like, subscribe, share, and let people know that you enjoy the content that we provide where everybody else does on that. And good afternoon to everybody joining in today. Doug Forrest, Keith Sewell, and Tom Musiak, and RG Jubilee saying hi right away. And we know Mitch Rothman's going to be saying hi. Mitch, we appreciate your Man Space Facebook page raising money for our renovation of our gift shop. And go to his page, and he's got a link to our PayPal that I'm going to share on our Facebook page here. But we're going to create a space memorabilia store within the American Space Museum, and hopefully you can come in and buy some real space stuff. And if you don't want to pay for the admission, that's fine. But thank you, Mitch Rothman. You all want to check out, if you're Facebookers, Man Space. He is true to the Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo programs and throws a little bit of shuttle stuff in there. But that's our wheelhouse, is celebrating the shuttle era that has changed our world in the 30 years that this magnificent flying machines first learned how to go to space in a reusable spacecraft, then all the science that they pioneered in the payload bay, and then all of that's being done after the construction of the International Space Station with some 35 shuttle missions. So thank you, Mitch. We appreciate all that you do and appreciate you being my friend. And you and Paula do great things there in Colorado right now. So, well, there's the Axiom 4 crew. Peggy Whitston in the middle there. And you've got on the left is Thor Kapu of his first flight. He's with a Hungarian astronaut. And beside Peggy, on her right, your left there, is Shabushu Shukla. He'll be the second Indian to go to space. The first one was back in 1984. And then on the far right is ESA astronaut Slaz Wozinski. And look how tall he is there compared to Peggy. And we've just blessed with all the ESA workers that were here, from the mission specialist planner Sergio to the astronaut trainer Luca that were on the show here last Friday. You want to check that out. They really peeled behind the curtains of the ESA training and so forth in a delightful Stay Curious program. And met up with Alex Carl yesterday. I'll show some pictures of that tomorrow, as we were at a jazz performance of 16 musicians called Joel's Jazz Cats. And astronaut Winston Scott was on the trumpet, Marty, last night in the back row. So my way of saying hi to Marty Winkle, very patient with me today to put something together to entertain you all for the next little bit here on Stay Curious. Hello, Steve Jokums in Fox Lake, Illinois. Robert Laws up in Dundee, Scotland. Dean Babcock and Carlton Bailey joining today, as well as Marvo Luca Empire. So thank you so much for your complimentary words there. Here is Carlton Bailey's work out on the pad on a Falcon 9. Not sure how many missions to space that's got, 3 or 4 by judging the patina of exhaust fumes that are clinging to the side there from the other missions. But that's pad 39A. Excellent photograph there. Carlton getting that palm tree in the foreground there. But they discovered a hydrogen fuel leak on one of the 9 Merlin engines, Marty, during the static test. And
oxygen.
Pardon me?
Oxygen.
Was it oxygen? Okay. Being corrected already. I read everywhere hydrogen, but if you say it's oxygen, it's oxygen. So something was leaking, and they had to pull it in. And I got to thinking, well, yeah, Elon Musk and SpaceX CEO can launch his own satellites flawlessly, like he does 2 or 3 times a week now. But you got this crewed mission, and you got a problem with it. And talking to docent John Smith, Marty, he said, well, maybe the other ones had an oxygen leak or whatever leak, and he launched them anyway because it was his money that he would have been losing if he was. So you don't know what's going on with the private companies now, and they're going to only reveal what they have to and what they're told to by NASA, the overseer of this whole operation. So, and so Steve Jokums, he's saying it's an RP1 problem, not a LOX problem. So read the sources there, but then again, private companies, they're just telling you what you want. They want you to hear out there. Point is, had a problem with the booster, not with the vehicle. This is a maiden flight of this 5th cargo Crew Dragon built. And Marty, did they have to pull it into the shed to fix it?
That I don't know.
I wondered if they know that there. Carlton may have taken this picture today when he went out to get his remote cameras that they set up there. So I've been told Friday is probably the date that they'll launch, and it will probably be like 7 in the morning. Each day the launch schedule slips back 20 minutes or so. Yeah, Marty?
Yeah, scheduled for 7:12.
7:12 Friday. All right. They got it. So they're all ready. Thank you, Marty. And my logic was a little bit right there. Well, I hate that because, one, everyone's going to be leaving Spaceview Park and not get a chance to come to Space Museum because we open at 10. And 2, I hate getting up in the morning. Okay, so, but looks like I will. I may go down and watch that from the Port St. John boat dock down there. Might be a good place to watch that near my home. So, but yes, a serious when, like docent John Smith said, when we're launching spacecraft with people on it, everything is checked and triple checked. And maybe they had this type of leak on other engines and in fluid anyway. Maybe not, okay? And Carlton says, yep, it's still on the pad. So they fixed it at the pad. So that's cool that they could do that out there. So we'll look forward to that. Peggy Whitson and crew, 3 rookies going up to space for 2 weeks. Sometimes I think an Axiom mission lasted 18 days. That might have been because they couldn't land where they wanted to. And Marty, I believe, if I'm correct, Steve Jokums, correct me if I'm wrong too, I believe they're planning the splashdown will be on the California coast. And they're abandoning the splashdowns on the Florida coast. I guess they have to take the capsule back to California to refurbish it anyway. And doing a little research on these Crew Dragons, I'm going to try to do a show on it next week. They wanted to get 5 missions out of them. And the other 3 of them, they've got 4 missions so far, and one of them 3. So So we'll just I'll try, like I said, try to figure out a little bit. They're trying to push the reusability, I read, to 15 missions of each Crew Dragon. So a lot of things I don't understand that they have to change out and do. So we'll figure that out when the time comes. So yes, so I had time to squeeze in a happy birthday. Our birthday boy today is this gentleman. Happy birthday to James Dougal Adrianus Van Hoften, nicknamed Ox, born in Fresno, California on June 11th, 1944. That makes him an octogenarian of French descent at 81, a Dutch descent. But he considers, born in Fresno, but he considers Burlingame, Florida to be his hometown. Van Hoften is a Vietnam Navy fighter veteran, spent 14 days in space on 2 mid-90s missions. This is his most famous one, when he retrieved the alien Solar Max satellite. He tested the manned maneuvering unit in the payload bay also. This was a 7-day mission. They deployed the long-duration exposure facility on that April 1984 mission, and that was supposed to be picked up in early 1986, but of course it wasn't because of the Challenger disaster. And then Van Hoften was on 61G flight of the Galileo spacecraft to Jupiter, but it was canceled after the Challenger disaster, prompting his retirement. All right. So 2 missions. The other one, he was the first on STS-51I in September 85. He was the first to manually grapple and manually deploy a satellite in orbit, all right, on that remote manipulator system built by Canada. There he is. Looks like he's out on a boat dock somewhere, so that's a good place to be, and how he looked a few years ago. Happy 81st birthday to Ox Van Hoften. He was part of the Bechtel Corporation, big conglomerate building stuff all over the world in there, and program manager for the $23 billion Hong Kong Airport Core program, including Hong Kong Airport. So he's probably eating a lot of good sushi, Marty. So I don't think that's your cup of tea, so to speak. Sushi, is it?
Nope.
And he's giving me a big no on that.
Not at all.
Not at all. All right. So, well, I'm going down a couple things in space history on this date in June 11th. A lot of ones going on, Marty, on June 11th here. Salyut 1 is shown here in drawing form, as Salyut 11 was spending the 6th day of its docking, coming in up there at the upper corner there. So you got Salyut 1 and Soyuz 11 on June 11th, okay? This was their 6th day. Unfortunately, when these gentlemen spent 28 days on the Salyut space station, the reentry, during reentry, a valve opened up, the air went out, they didn't have spacesuits on, they were just in comfortable clothes, flight clothes like we did in the early days of the first 25 shuttle launches, and they died of asphyxiation. All right, a big tragedy. There is the Salyut 1, the first space station put in space in 1971, 2 years before Skylab. All right. Just a core module with a couple solar panels on it, one docking port on the end. This was a picture that you see was damaged by the re-entry somehow of these astronauts who lost their life, and they're immortalized in such things as stamps and other things, buried in Red Square. And we talk about that usually when that happens in July. Also, some ones to ponder on June 11th is Skylab 1, okay, known as Skylab 2 to the engineering group, and Skylab 1 to everybody in the media, the first crewed flight to the America's first space station, not international, of course. And there you had Pete Conrad in the middle, Joe Kerwin on the left, and Paul Weitz on the right. We spent 28 days in space at that time. That broke the record of Salyut 1. I think theirs was 21 days, 22 days, something like that. And so they this was a very successful mission. Of course, they had to repair Skylab up there in orbit, launched on a Saturn S1B on the milk stool, they called it there. Built a platform to go up to all the service structure, umbilicals and so forth on the LUT, the Launch Umbilical Tower. Right, Marty?
That's right.
There's the red thing there, the LUT. And 3 Skylab missions real quick from 73 to 74. Crewed, did spacewalks to change film on the solar camera that was cutting edge at the time. When you see the Skylab, I guess I don't have a picture of Skylab in there in this one, but did a lot of biomedical things. And there's the controls that Ed Gibson on Skylab 3 is at, that controlled the astronomical observatory that had the windmill type of power solar panels on it. And I always come to mind when I think about that, why couldn't they use those for power, to power up the Skylab? We'll have to ask that question. And there's Cape Canaveral, Space Force now, a photograph taken by Jack Lausma. Told me he took that photo. One of the coolest photos of the Cape from 150 miles up. Shuttles of the month of June, you know, they're dear to my heart. As I reach for my Shuttle of June folder there, we had 11 beautiful shuttles launched. All the orbiters spent time in space, all 5 of them. The leader was Columbia with 100 OV-102 with 4 flights. We had Mir's last docking was STS-91 in the upper left with the Russian space station Mir. Of course, Salyut 1 pioneered that. Again, did I say 11 shuttles launched in the month of June? Here we're talking about June 11th. Yep. Magical ones here today. We're going to talk a little bit about STS-111 that I call 4 aces there in the middle here in just a second. 68 days in space, and this was a unique month because 22% of the occupants of the shuttles were women, the biggest of any month of the time. We had, that includes 11 women went to space in the month of June, and of the 68 astronauts, no, 15 of them were women. 15 women crewed. Bonnie Dunbar and Baker flew twice in the month of June there. So some very interesting pioneering missions there. None, but 3 of them were hard hat missions we're going to talk about going on in this month up there. And we'll be talking next week on the 18th when we launch Sally Ride to space for the first time. And there's a real nice tribute to Sally Ride as they named the, Marty, did you catch it yet? They named the westbound side going west on the new overpass going 405 after Sally Ride. Have you noticed that yet?
No, I haven't seen it. Bill Whiting told me about it, and I thought the entire bridge was the Sally Ride Bridge.
Well, no, because there's 2 bridges, Marty.
Right.
They built 2 bridges, so the one bridge is got somebody else's name on it. I noticed the other day.
Yeah, I didn't notice.
Maybe they named both of them Sally Ride, but
I'll check it out tomorrow.
I saw somebody else's name on the one going eastbound on there, but there are actually 2 bridges that they built, just like in the city of Cocoa connecting to Merritt Island. Maybe they did. You confirm that for me and let me know. But Carlton Bailey sent me a picture of that, but I want a picture of it with the bridge in the background. So, but we'll share that next week with you all. promise. So let's look at the shuttle in the middle there, 111. The E is there because it's Endeavour. Okay. And let me consult the shuttle scroll, Marty, and see a minute here what STS 111, fetch the scroll. I am curious. This was the 18th flight of Endeavour. All right. And they took Peggy Whitson up to the International Space Station on her first flight. Okay. And this is odd that she's poised for her fifth flight in quarantine. They've delayed this launch a couple times as she could have made it to the Astronaut Hall of Fame. But this patch symbolizes the hardware, people, and partner nations contributing to the flight. Endeavour rises on the plume of the astronaut office symbol, carrying the Canadian Mobile Base System for installation. The ISS orbit completes the astronaut office symbol and is colored red, white, and blue to depict the flags of US, Russia, France, and Costa Rica. The Earth background shows Italy, which contributes the multi-purpose logistic module used to resupply the ISS, which was, which I say that was, not Columbus, not Raffia, I forget which mobile purpose module that was. And the star at the top represents the Johnson Space Center from which the flight managed. And you got the names of the STS-111 crew, border the patch, and Expedition 4 and 5 are 4 is in the top and 5 is on the bottom, as this was the fourth swap out of a crew on the ISS. Mark Jacobs worked with the crew for this artwork here. So looks pretty cool up there. And here is the crew astronauts there. This was their final hard hat EVA today in 2002 on this mission for ACES 111, 3 ACES 111. And there you got Ken Cockrell's the commander, Paul Lockhart's the pilot. Okay. Paul's on the left seated. Franklin Chang Diaz, Philip Perron, that was Franklin's seventh and last flight. Philip Perron, Valerie Corzon, Peggy Whitson, Sergei Yesov, Yuri Onfruko, Carl Waltz came down, and Daniel Birch came down from the International Space Station on there. So a final hard hat mission today in space in 2002 for STS-111. And then there's Peggy and the two others there. The way she looked, 23 years ago. Wow. 2002 is her first 23 years she's been involved going to space. She is 65 years old. And here's the Hollywood poster for STS-117. The final major install of starboard wings was delivered on this mission in 2007. And let me pull out my STS-117 crib notes here. Marine Colonel Frederick Stutkow, URA, was the commander on this mission. Air Force Colonel Lee Archibald was the pilot. Now, Stutkow was a pilot for the Virgin Galactic airplane that takes the Virgin Galactic space plane up. No, actually, I got that wrong. He was actually a space plane flyer on several of their missions. They haven't done that in a while, Marty. The Virgin Galactic space plane, don't know when they're going to fly again. But Stutkow is involved with that program. Patrick Forrester, mission specialist. You got Danny Olivas, Clayton Anderson, Jim Riley, and Steve Swanson. Now, we met Jim Riley, and Clayton Anderson's got a book out that I just picked up that I'm going to read on there. But this was a 14-day mission involving 4 spacewalks to deliver and activate the truss segments, the backbone of the space station, and the starboard wings were delivered. And there's Riley on one of his space flights there, spacewalks there. What a gorgeous picture that is, with the thin blue line of the Earth there behind him doing some work. So, and let's see here. Did I? Oh, I don't have their patch up here. Did I put it in there? Nope, I didn't put that patch up there for STS 117. We'll, and I don't even see it in the poster there. You see it on their spacesuits, but I won't tell you the artwork behind that. It's too small. But I will tell you about this mission, STS 124 in 2008, delivered the Kibo laboratory. Okay, launched. Let me find my notes on that one. I think that's the last one launched of the month here. Can't find my notes on that patch there, but I can tell you about it. We'll tell you about it from our book here that we love talking about, the Mission Patch Book. 121, of course, the Kibo module delivered on 124. And the patch depicts the Space Shuttle Discovery docked with the International Space Station. That's kind of cool, the silhouette there. Dedicated to delivering and installing the Japanese experiment module, JEM, known as Kibo, which means hope in Japanese. The significance of the mission and the Japanese contribution to the ISS is recognized by the Japanese flag depicted on the pressurized module there at the end of the robotic arm. The word Kibo written in Japanese at the bottom of the patch. So that's what that means at the bottom, is Kibo. It means hope. The view of the sun rising down upon Earth represents the increased hope that the entire world will benefit from Kibo's scientific discoveries. Mark Kelly was the commander. Ken Ham on board there as the pilot. Karen Nyberg, I met her, beautiful person. Ron Guerin, also been in our museum. Michael Fossum, Akihoko Hoshidi, JAXA mission specialist. Looked through my telescope at one of the hotels in Cocoa Beach when I was doing an outreach where they were staying at, and he was supporting a Japanese astronaut. Gregory Shamatov and Garrett Reisman on board this mission here. So a cool looking patch. I've always liked that patch, Marty, there. The American flag, Japan, once at war with each other, and now in harmony. There's the Kibo module there. It's one of the unique modules on the International Space Station because there is a airlock between that and the platform. Kibo was taken up, then that platform was brought out, and they can put scientific experiments out there and then bring them back in through the airlock to harvest the experiment, whatever's going on there, and send the data back to Earth. So I don't believe Canada built that arm for them. I think they built their own arm. I could be wrong, so correct me if I am wrong. But that is, I thought naively, Marty, that once we decommissioned the space station, the Kibo module, you know, it's been up there since 2008, so it's only 17 years old and not 25 like some parts of the ISS, that it could be separated off and float around for a while and then be attached to another space station. Not going to happen. Everything needs to stay intact, and everything needs to be together to deorbit properly where they want to deorbit the ISS. It'll come down as one whole unit. Plus, I was told by astronaut Bob Cabana, when I asked that question to him at the Astronaut Hall of Fame panel discussion, he said it would, the logistics of disconnecting all of this and everything would be far too complex to redo the installation there. And something that I picked up about the Axiom 4 mission going up is they are going to do some things with this Crew Dragon to boost, to boost the they're going to use thrusters on the Dragon to move the space station up to a higher orbit, which will help them understand about what needs to be done for a kind of a Crew Dragon autonomous mission that they're going to fly up there to deorbit, actually have a vehicle that SpaceX has got the contract for to attach to the space station to send it on its merry way into the Indian Ocean. So, Marty, you got any questions or anything I'm missing up there?
No.
Okay. And Steve Jokums was commenting on the ATM solar panels had a triangular end due to the meteoroid shield mishap that occurred during the launch. But no, they're not going to separate everything. Will it separate as it's burned and cause a problem? Says Jubilee. Don't know. Don't know. They hope not. That's why everything's steadily together there, so they want to keep it together. But boy, that Indian Ocean at the bottom of it must look like something to whales or whatever's floating around down there, because that is the dumping ground for satellites in there. So 2008, a fresh Kibo module was connected at the space station on STS-124. So get away from this data and history, but still with the number one thing, Chinese Shenzhou 10 in their first space station Tiangong 1 with the second woman launched to space. 3 tachionauts and the second woman on her first flight, Wang Yaping. I think I got a picture here. She's on the right, and the other Chinese tachionauts. Now, this is also called Tiangong Heavenly Palace, but it was Tiangong 1. And they put up 2 space stations, Tiangong 1 and 2. And that kind of misses its mark there in the green screen. But it was just a cylinder shape, much like Salyut 1 was, as you see there on the patch. Okay. Also, the Shenzhou spacecraft looks like a knockoff of the Soyuz spacecraft. They were partnering with Russia at that time. Yes, Marty.
Marvel Luca Empire 33 was asking, was Skylab the precursor to the ISS?
Well, yes, of course it was. We didn't have any space station in between it. We learned how to be in space by Skylab. It was brought down by atmospheric drag created by a solar maximum when the sun gets hotter and is covered with sunspots, and there's a lot of activity that's thrown off the sun, and that heats up the Earth's atmosphere. And when you heat something, it expands, and the atmosphere actually went up further than they thought it would to create drag. Now, this ain't like clouds in your atmosphere. This is molecules of atmosphere. Still, you're running into that and bringing it down. And so Skylab was the precursor of the ISS. Also, importantly, the payload bay of the Space Shuttle was a precursor of Skylab, of our space station, because they did a lot of science as well as hard hat things that needed to be done, and something to build a space station. Something that I learned, Marty, at a panel discussion on spacewalks was from Jerry Ross, and Jerry Ross said that when we did a task in the payload bay, elementary things, they were literally putting together, different segments of tubing and so forth, that pipes, fittings, hoses, things like that would have to be done, routine maintenance on the ISS, that you had a time frame that you had to get it done if you were in the sunshine, because you're going to be 45 minutes in the sunshine, 45 minutes in darkness. Well, 45 minutes in sunshine is hot, 200 degrees hot. The night side's 200 degrees below zero. And he said some things that were flexible we had to work with quickly and attach before we got into the cold orbit, and things literally froze up and were not pliable. Never thought about that. Also, Jerry Ross said that he insisted on using actual hardware and placing it where it was supposed to go in the payload bay, and they found that things were shorter or longer than they were supposed to be, and the fittings were the wrong fittings on there. So a lot of smart astronauts wanted to do things before they did them in space. Not, and of course, a lot of this was also done in the neutral buoyancy lab, the biggest swimming pool in the world there, where they would put a replica of the shuttle and space station and so forth in there. Yes, Marty.
Got a question from Chris Giorgio. Why couldn't Skylab be boosted to a higher orbit from a Centaur docked with it when they determined the space shuttle wasn't available?
A good question, Giorgio. One, they probably did boost it as much as they could, but that's a fuel consumption. And where is the engines? They are on the command module, the Apollo command module. So they'd have to use their thrusters and so forth. We did not, so wish they had, but that takes engineering. When they realized it was coming down quicker than they thought, they probably couldn't get something off the drawing board into production to do it quick enough. And once again, you got to turn back the hands of time, Chris. This is the 20th century in 1973, okay? And you're thinking with a 50-year perspective that there right now might be something that SpaceX had lying around, or Blue Origin, or NASA, that could be quickly adapted to be a boost. But what the Russians did on their Salyut and Mir space stations was they actually had a long pole elevated off of it that had a thruster on it. And that thruster could be thrust down to increase. And that's how they raised the height of the Mir space station, was with an actual thruster on a long tower structure. Now, I think that tower structure may have had not liquid, but solid rockets on it that the astronauts did. They could actually lower that boom and put new rockets on it, maybe, and put it up there. But great questions that you're thinking about. We have the most intelligent viewers of any podcast out there. So Shenzhou 10 in the first space station we were talking about there, kind of lost. There's their patch, there's their crew, and Yang Ping took her off our wall there. Okay, Yang Ping, I think this is a name that maybe in 2030 might be ringing a bell with people. At least astronaut Rusty Schweikert, when he was in our women's gallery and saw this, he said of all the 80-some women that were on the wall, this, of all that he's met, this is the woman who impressed him the most. He said she is going to be the first woman on the moon. Didn't he, Marty? Were you in the room when he said that? Marty's nodding his head just to support that I'm not talking crazy talk. An Air Force colonel, worked as a pilot prior to selection, second Chinese woman to space, one of two women in space on the 50th anniversary of Valentina Tereshkova's first flight. She flew to space on Shenzhou 10 and has 187 days in space, 197 days. So very experienced on two missions. I would anticipate her going up in another Tiangong mission. Their Heavenly Palace is still up there. I see somebody asked, does anyone know the life expectancy of the Chinese space station? And I don't. My conjecture would be 10 years. This one's been up there about 5. They're rotating crews out every 6 months like we are in the International Space Station. But it is very simple, just a couple school buses put together, if you will. And I've always looked at it like it's so clean on board there. It's just they don't have much wires and so forth on there. And then the ESA reps we had on here, both Sergio and Lucas, said, well, Mark, every time we add a new experiment. It has a computer. You have wires to that. We're not detaching other wires in our modules, that we keep them there to keep other experiments running. So in the early days, the International Space Station did look less cluttered, but the clutter's caused by 25 years of adding experiments, other systems to the inside of it there. So um, interesting to see what the Chinese are going to do. They have vowed they're going to be on the moon by 2030, have a very calculated plan, not just on their crewed missions, but also their unmanned missions to the South Pole. Have a big plan. And something the Chinese this was the 5th crewed launch since 2003. So we got 22 years of China orbiting human beings around the Earth. And they have 3 women integrated already into their space program. And in the 61 years that Russia's put people in space, they've only had 4 women. 4 total Russians are women that have orbited the Earth. And of the 83, there's over 60 American women that have been in space up there. So hope that you love my little countdown of space history. All those 1s and 11s and 10s going on there. Kind of interesting. From Shenzhou 10, STS-124, STS-117, STS-111, Skylab 1 to the media, Soyuz 11 and Salyut 1, all involved in space history on June 11th. And that's why you watch Stay Curious, to see what can Mark come up with. So, well, I'll tell you something we're coming up with tomorrow that'll be a lot more structured and that I'm looking forward to always, is this guy, Mr. Bert Dicht. Bert, looking forward to you being on Stay Curious tomorrow, holding Rupert the Armadillo out there at the Cape Canaveral Space Force's Sand History Museum. It's undergone a complete renovation. Of course, Bert is the managing director of the memberships for National Space Society, and he's going to be talking about the conference that's going to be a week from this weekend in Orlando at the Rosen House. We'll tell you how you can be involved in the International Development or International Space Development Conference. I believe it's their 47th year to hold this conference, talking about the civilized space, how to get populations in orbit, in cislunar space, and on the moon, and eventually Mars. So looking forward to you, my friend, being on the show tomorrow. And if I said the moon, Marty, is 16 days old, okay? Is it a good stargazing night tonight or not? 16-day moon.
That'd be a full moon.
Nope, it's not. Just a couple days after full moon, it'll be rising somewhere around 9 o'clock, probably wherever you're at along our fruited plain. And you're going to see it orbiting up above the sky. It's going to look bigger near the horizon. You'll all see that, but you can always cover your little finger with it outstretched. As the moon doesn't change in size, it's the same size directly overhead as it's on the horizon. But boy, I say a little finger covering at arm's length, and you're going to say, Mark, a basketball wouldn't cover it. It looks so big. That is the moon illusion, a psychological thing going on in our brains when you see the moon next to a mountain, a building, a tree. It looks larger in life than it really is. So go out and get your little moonshine this weekend. It'll still be up, or the next few days it'll be up before you go to bed. That's the only kind of moonshine that you can't get too much of. Right, Jim McDade? Appreciate you watching today. Yes, it was the strawberry moon full phase there, as you all up in the north are stuffing your face with delicious strawberries. We did that in April here in Florida. So thank you, Jim McDade, for watching. Michael Bruno is watching. Appreciate him joining our social hour today. Mitch Rothman says hi. Cliff Watson, how's everything on Thursday morning there in Pomona, Australia, Cliffy? I talked to an Australian lady last night at the jazz concert where Winston Scott was playing, and she said, yep, it's cold down in Australia, as you guys are just a few weeks away from official winter down there. Chris Giorgio, thank you for joining the family of Stay Curious. Mr. JSV650, glad you're watching. Elena, Tom Usail, Marvell, Carlton Bailey, Dean Babcock, Robert Law, Steve Jokums, Doug Forrest, Dr. Keith Sewell, Tom Usiak, and RG Jubilee. Hope you all enjoyed a little look at a bunch of missions with ones in them today on Stay Curious. Until tomorrow with Bert Dick, I'm Mark Marquette saying I can't wait to see you in our museum to bridge the space between us. Thank you so much.